can't believe that it's already been half a decade since I completed and released my very first genuine attempt at making an animated short film, The Grover Guys. As long as I have been creating and toying around with my own original cartoon characters for, this one short marked an achievement in getting more people to love a creation of my own as much as they love my fan-made content. But before I express my full gratitude for your support for my characters, I would love to tell the story of how I fulfilled my ambition to single-handedly put that first Grover Guys short together. Of course, I talked about the making of it before, whether it's on my website, in my previous live streams, or during my interview on The Color of Motion. But this time, I'm gathering together all the core details, plus a few other things you may not have known before about the short, into one fully edited documentary retrospective video thing. I hope you find it inspiring as much as you'll find it informative. Now, to quote the titular Pogo Jumpin' Trio, let's get hoppin' with the story of how the Grover Guys hopped from sketch to screen. Six years later, I still remember the date clearly. August 9th, 2018. That was the night I drew my first ever doodle of Mikey, Beanie, and Dee in my sketchbook. I also remember where I was when I was doodling them. Do you want to know why the Grover Guys paid such obvious homage to the classic Chuck Jones short, The Dover Boys? Well, it wasn't just because I simply loved that short as a work of comedic animation, especially after learning how it inspired Gendy Tartakovsky's snappy style for Dexter's Laboratory, but rather, it was mainly because I happened to be watching Tanel Flower's video discussing the significance of smear frames and breaking down the usage of them in the Dover Boys specifically. So, as one may naturally feel whenever they doodled, it was just out random when I sketched two men and a duck sticking one of their arms out while putting their other hand on their chests as if they were serenading their own door standpipe stand-in. Plus, the Dover Boys is thankfully in the public domain, so we're all free to rip it off. Next, I'll talk about the individual inspirations for each Grover Guy, given that they hardly resemble the Dover Boys themselves on the outside. In an example of what TV tropes would call comic book fantasy casting, Mikey's design pays tribute to one of my favorite voice actors, Kevin Michael Richardson, the go-to guy for bringing a heaping amount of sass and boldness with his deep voice. As for Beanie, the fact that he wears a beanie with a propeller on it was a design choice serving as an indication that he is a man who is still in touch with his inner child. And that way of thinking was part of why I gave the trio a love for hopping on pogo sticks. Lastly, there's my, and possibly yours, favorite member of the trio, Dee. Basically, I was thinking, what if Seep from Seep in the Big City was a duck? That explains his big tilted eyes. Also, what does DD even stand for? I thought it could be an abbreviation for Duck Dude, but it can also be a subtle nod to how quite a few famous cartoon ducks have names that could be abbreviated into DD. Daffy Duck, Donald Duck, Daisy Duck, but of those three, DD is closer to personality to Daffy, especially the goofier, Clampett style Daffy. So after I did that first sketch of the Grover Guys, I would have a few moments during the remainder of August 2018 where I'd imagine these three in a Dover Boys style comedic melodrama, meaning a love interest and main antagonist have to be created next. In the middle of the month was when I drew my first sketches of Henrietta Horvitz, who came from a desire to create a sexy, fancy-looking femme fatale type character inspired by Major Dr. Gasly's glamorous makeover in the Evil Concarne episode Jealousy Jealous Do, when she's trying to get Hector Concarne, a disembodied brain mind you, to finally notice her. This was back when my crush on Gasly was still very strong, so it was only natural that she served as the basis for my own cartoon sex symbol. Also, her last name Horvitz is a tribute to another one of my favorite voice actors, Richard Horvitz, aka Billy. On the topic of Grim and Evil, during that show's anniversary, August 24th, was when I first doodled the Grover Guys' arch enemy, Dirty Dick Avery. Drawn while I was listening to a character design course on LinkedIn Learning, Dick Avery is a comically over-the-top villain, not unlike Dan Backslide, whose design takes cues from Disney's Pete and the Wolf from Tex Avery's MGM cartoons. And yes, he was partially named after Tex Avery because of that. along with his first name, Dick, intended to be a reference to Law & Order creator Dick Wolf. Ha, get it? Clever visual pun, right? Rounded out the main cast of characters is the delivery snail, who reads the telegram of Henrietta's call for help. Now here's something really interesting. The snail actually predates everyone else in the cast. How so? Well, the snail, albeit without his hat and mailbag, originated from a 2012 sketchbook page in which I was doodling a cast of anthropomorphic animals in a similar vein to regular show, since I was really getting into that show at the time. This is also where the tall red bird, who the delivery snail beats up as he gets carried away with reading the telegram, was born. Clearly a Mordecai type dude, with the snail intended to fill in the Rigby role. So, remembering that snail design I doodled over 5 years earlier, I decided to have a delivery snail in the story to fill in the role of the telegram messenger guy in the Dover Boys. Also, another visual pun. Get it? Snail mail! He represents the ironically named Roadrunner delivery service. Now, my first doodle of the snail in his delivery getup was done in early October 2018, which was a period of time when I really began to picture this Grover guy short in my head, and feel the serious motivation to do this as an animated short film that will not only be uploaded to YouTube, but also be submitted to film festivals. In general, 2018 was an important year for me personally when it comes to drawing my technique palette as an animator, cartoon artist, and video editor. Thanks to taking several virtual courses, I taught myself how to use several Adobe programs like Premiere Pro and Photoshop, began creating my first 3D animations with the help of Blender, and fell more in love with keyframing than ever before. So with all of that experimentation I've been doing for the past several months up till that point, I thought it was time for me to take the creative knowledge I've learned and implement them into a short film. I compared that thought to how Walt Disney would produce all of these silly symphony sorts that serve as both storytelling and technical experiments to some extent, before his artists and animators took all that experience to craft the studio's ambitious inaugural animated feature film, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. My main motivation for wanting to submit the Grover Guys to a film festival stems from knowing how it is an elaborate method of networking. Several famous animators got their starts doing student films that would end up being screened at festivals like the Ottawa International Animation Festival or Spike and Mike's Festivals of Animation, and they ended up landing a job on a hit anime series. This is how SpongeBob creator Steven Hillenburg got discovered by Joe Murray to become a director on Rocko's Modern Life, for example. Or how Craig McCracken got Hanna-Barbera's attention so he could turn his Whoop-Ass Girls into the Powerpuff Girls. Of course, with or without the specific intention of submitting to film festivals, aspiring animators should definitely make short little animations anyway. Put them on the internet, receive feedback, and continue going back to the drawing board if you feel like something needs improvement. You won't get better otherwise. I've been doing animations for YouTube just for fun since I first created this channel, and while none of those earlier animations hold up on a technical level anymore, I retained the ambition to get better. I went from animating with Microsoft Paint and Windows Movie Maker to coming up with a slightly more polished technique that allows me to create traditional animation without a scanner, because I was ambitious. So going back to this ambitious goal to make my first true animated short film, I continue brainstorming how the Grover Guys will play out with the help of my big black sketchbook. I sketched out several gags and minor character designs, many of which made it into the finalized film, while others were cut. It didn't just feel like doodling, it also felt like I was legitimately storyboarding this concept. Speaking of Joe Murray, he wrote in his book, Creating Anime Cartoons with Character, that when you're creating your own anime series, you should envision yourself coming across a show that you've never seen before, but it has you written all over it. And that was how I felt when I was making the Grover Guys, a love letter to all the things I enjoy about my favorite genre of animation, comedy. Other than the Dover Boys and Looney Tunes in general, Shows like SpongeBob, Ren and Stimpy, The Simpsons, Family Guy, Billy and Mandy, Evil Con Carne, Dexter's Lab, Rocko's Modern Life, and Sheep in the Big City all played a part in influencing the Grover Guy's humor, characters, as well as my default animation style. Sheep in particular is where much of the short's habit of breaking the fourth wall comes from. Okay, with all that being said, I think we can now move on to the actual production story of the Grover Guys. Before we do, however, I would like to remind you to hit the like button if you're enjoying this story so far, and subscribe for more content like this, and to help balance out this ratio. Also, please consider supporting me on Ko-fi, because making these free videos for you guys is not super easy, you know. Your support really helps me out as an independent artist. Thanks! In total, the Grover Guys took me 9 months to make, from October 2018 to July 2019. Since this is largely a Looney Tunes inspired cartoon, a decision I made to craft the story was to have it be a storyboard driven project. To those who don't understand what I mean, a board driven cartoon means that the story isn't fully scripted, but rather it relies on an outline of the plot written in a few paragraphs before the storyboard artists do most of the work to write out dialogue, give directions, and visualize the full story through sketches. This was how the classic Warner Bros. Animated shorts were made, and it is considered to be a more authentic method to develop a cartoon than relying on a fully written script, because of the nature that comes with being part of a visual medium. Of course, as long as the final product is good, it doesn't matter if it's script driven or board driven, though some may argue if your cartoon is heavier on dialogue than physical humor, it's best to stick with scripts. In any case, I wrote my outline for the Grover Guys on October 23rd, 2018, and because I had already done a lot of brainstorming earlier that month, outlining the story didn't result into the same detours caused by writer's block that disrupt my process for writing scripts for YouTube videos like this. After the outline was written, it was time to storyboard. The fact that the Grover Guys is a fully storyboarded project was a first for me. I have been teaching myself how to storyboard for over a year at this point, looking at the boards found in my copy of the SpongeBob SquarePants experience, some videos on YouTube, and by browsing through different boards online, like these ones for the Grim Adventures of Billy and Mandy. It was satisfying to learn such storyboard terms as S/A, basically meaning same as the previous panel, so I wouldn't have to redraw a character who's in a static pose. But since I was doing my boards digitally, inside my main drawing software at the time, Fire Alpaca, I also had the luxury of copying and pasting layers if needed. Also, I used my preliminary sketches in my sketchbook as model sheets of sorts as I was boarding the short. At times, it could feel challenging and tedious to figure out how to execute my vision into board form, but it turned out to be a satisfying challenge. Storyboarding this 15-minute short was a 4-month process, going from October 2018 to near the end of February 2019. Once the boards were all done, along with this model sheet lining up the 6 main characters, I went about casting the voices. Now, I did some voices in the Grover Guys myself. I played Mikey, who was me trying to do my best Kevin Michael Richardson impression.
Henrietta, who speaks with a feminine falsetto that I had to pitch up in Audacity.
The narrator, who often interacts with the characters much like the one from Sheep in the Big City, and a few other minor voices, from the turtle to the Raisin Bran loving son. However, I was aware that my voice acting chops aren't the best, let alone enough to take on hammier characters like Dick Avery and Dee Dee. This is where 2 online acquaintances of mine came in to fill in those gaps with their superior voice acting skills. The first person I reached out to was Kristen Frades, an up-and-coming voice actor who I befriended thanks to us sharing a love for Evil Con Carne and obscure media in general, and to this day he's proven to be one of my best ever supporters. Because of such dedication in the years since, I have to give the honors to Kristen himself to talk about his experience being a part of the Grover Guys. Take it away, Kristen.
Hi, this is Christian Frades, and I loved voicing in the Grover Guys. For Hades, I had to do General Scar's voice. Well, no one's asking you to smell them.
And for the bartender, I sounded like this.
And as for Beanie, he has that kind of lisp. And I absolutely loved voicing in the Grover Guys. I can't believe it's been 5 years. Wow.
Thanks, Kristen. I appreciate you. The other voice actor I brought on to help is one you may be familiar with, Matthew Whittemore, better known as Animator320. I know his reputation isn't the best nowadays, but at the time we were friends and I was in love with his Cartoon Mania series. It not only impressed me how he animated it in Open Office of all programs, but his wild, energetic voice acting was his video's biggest strength. I easily pictured him providing the voices of the show-stealing characters Dee Dee, Dick Avery, and the Delivery Snail. When giving him directions, I remember messaging him to voice Dee Dee similarly to his wacky quacky duck character, play Dick with an exaggerated version of his self-insert character's voice, and that the Delivery Snail was reminiscent of fast-talking, old-timey radio men. I thought he did an excellent job voicing all of his roles, and it made me think about how it was a good thing I waited until all of the voices were recorded before I got to animating the dialogue scenes. More on that later. Once I finalized the casting, I prepared copies of the recording script for all three of us. Kristen's and Matthew's copies both had yellow highlights on their respective lines of dialogue. What's important to note about the recording script is that it ended up serving as a third draft of the story, following the original outline and storyboards. The most notable change I made was making Mikey be the leader of the trio instead of Beanie, upon realizing that he gave more commands than Beanie did. There were also some jokes I revised while preparing the script as well. I could go on about the differences between these earlier drafts and the final product, along with the deleted scenes that actually got to be animated, but I believe those are stories best reserved for a standalone video. This one is already getting long enough as it is. Before we get into the animation and design side of things, there's no way I can skip how I made another audio related decision after storyboarding the Grover Guys, the usage of Ryan Whittle's library of free hip-hop beats. Originally, I imagined the short soundtrack consisted of more classic-sounding orchestrated music cues, much like Carl Stallings scores for Looney Tunes or the APM stock music tracks heard on Ren and Stimpy and SpongeBob, but then it was my mom who introduced me to Ryan Whittle's music, and I became open-minded to using his work for my short soundtrack. After browsing through some tracks that could fit the short's tone, along with deciding on what to use as leitmotifs for some of the characters, I reached out to Ryan via email and he gave me permission to use his beats for my project. Thinking about my choice to associate Ryan's music with the Grover Guys, I compared it to the usage of Vince Guaraldi's jazzy piano score for the classic Charlie Brown specials. It may have seemed unconventional for the type of project this was supposed to be at first, but it ended up working enough to create some distinction. Since the Grover Guys, Ryan Whittle has had a very common presence in my videos' background music for the past 5 years now, and I'm grateful to be a fan of his. Okay, let's get into the most complicated step in the making of the Grover Guys, the animation and designs. Where to start with the details? How about some general info? All the character animation layouts, most of the background art, props, and handmade effects were drawn in Fire Alpaca, which is a free drawing software by the way. Photoshop was used to add layer effects like shadows, as well as to create some extra graphics and additional backgrounds. Some occasional CGI was done in Blender, like for this shot of the guys on their pogo sticks or Mikey's ideal light bulb. To compose each scene to render, I imported the necessary PSD and PNG files into Premiere Pro and add them to my timeline. Stuff like character animations composed of several layers for the models required me to create nested sequences, much like the pre-composition tools in After Effects. Oh yeah, and keyframes were definitely among my best friends during this process. All 141 scenes that were storyboarded had their project files organized into folders. Christina Abernathy would be proud. If you don't get the reference, listen to the Abernathy Zone podcast. Please, it's so underrated. I'll talk about it in a future video. Anyway, back on topic. Remember when I said earlier how it was a good thing I waited until the voice recordings from my co-stars came in before I went deep into the animation? It's because when you're animating dialogue, it's very vital to have your characters lip sync and gestures capture how the actors deliver their lines as much as they can. Look at several Disney characters like Vincent Price's Ratigan in The Great Mouse Detective, for instance. I had a blast animating Matthew Whittemore's roles because he had this passionate energy in his performances, especially for a villain as hammy as Dick Avery. As for Kristen Frady's performance as Beanie, one thing I noticed was how he seemed to give him a lisp, and I liked that. so I made sure to incorporate said wisp in Beanie's animation. Of course, I can't stress enough how tedious it is to do whip sync it in Premiere Pro. Sure, I had audio scrubbing to help me out, but it didn't make dragging the mouth shapes into the timeline and reducing the amount of frames it lasts for too much easier. No wonder so many animated shorts are dialogue free. Of course, I'm still happy that Kristen and Matthew were a part of it. Now, with this short paying homage to the Dover Boys, you can bet that there were naturally a lot of smear frames drawn to speed up the Grover guys' pacing, as well as production on the animation. In general, several shortcuts were taken in order for me to beat the film festival's submission deadline. The gang's pogo jumping was mostly the same pose. You rarely see the characters' feet when they walk. And the motorcycle that Dick steals was barely redrawn, meaning I made sure that an outline-only model of it was exported so I can just draw a new expression of Dick over it without redrawing the motorcycle as well. Overall, for the remaining 5 months of the Grover Guys' production, the animation, design, composition, and editing were being done concurrently. I will complete and render several sequences at a time in Premiere Pro, with the voice tracks, music cues, and important sound effects mixed in. By the way, you'll know how happy I was when I hit the jackpot by finding entire libraries of recognizable, even nostalgic, cartoon sound effects on Internet Archive. I should note that I am madly in love with sound design in Maxwell Adams' cartoons in particular, so you can bet I took influence from them for the sound design here. This bassoon sound effect in particular is one of my all-time favorites. Once all the individual sequences were exported, I brought them all into a master project file for the final round of post-production, added in extra sound effects, and cutting out and revising some scenes, mostly for time reasons. Yes, it felt like I was finally running across the finish line with this wacky passion project that I've been working on for endless minutes and hours and days and months. So after 9 months of hard work, the Grover Guys was completed on July 11, 2019. Right after that, I submitted it to the Forest City Film Festival in London, Ontario via Film Freeway. I was excited. This was the final step to achieving my goal of creating an animated short that people in a seated audience will love. However, in a bittersweet turn of events, the FCFF told me on August 4th that they wouldn't screen it as part of their main program, but they will name it an honorable mention. They even gave me a nice little laurel to add to my poster. Since it was pretty much denied a premiere at the festival, I decided to live premiere it on YouTube instead, to mostly positive feedback. Thank you to everyone who left their nice comments and critiques on the Grover Guys on the day of its premiere and since then. I'm pleased that you laughed at it, enjoyed the characters, and appreciate the queer homage it pays to the Dover Boys. Remember, this was back when the trend of indie animation online wasn't on the same levels as it is today with stuff like Helva Boss, Long Gone Goats, Lackadaisy, and of course the amazing Digital Circus. And while Mikey, Beanie, and Dee Dee are not on Pomni levels of recognition yet, I'm glad that they are loved by you guys enough to see them as some of my definitive original characters alongside Mr. Smiley and Oscar the Cat. Since the short's release, I continued to toy around with the characters, drawing new art of them, doing shorter skits with them, and putting them on merch being sold on my online stores. I heard some demand from you guys to see them in another proper short film, and trust me, without saying much, I got ideas for further funny stories with the Grover Guys cast. In fact, I even created a partner in crime for Dick Avery, a sheep named Wooly Rightman. Get it? His name's a play on Disney legend Wolfgang Wooly Riverman. Also, in the past 2 years, I did get some love from the film festival world when I successfully submitted 2 experimental 10-second shorts for the AniJam portion of the TAIS Animation Showcase in Toronto. And I'll admit, with these guys in particular, Sage Braxton and friends, they've been the most I've ever felt in love with a set of original characters I created since the Grover Guys. Again, without saying much, I definitely would love to expand on them too. However, I still have places in my heart for Mikey, Beanie, Dee Dee, Henrietta, Dick Avery, and the Delivery Snail. Looking back at the Grover Guys 5 years later, as proud as I am with this achievement, is far from perfect, and there are some things that I would have done better on a technical level nowadays. In general, because I'm continuing to improve my draftsmanship and creative skills as the years go by, there are less and less examples of older works that fully hold up today. But once again, it was enough of an achievement to win some fans who genuinely appreciate what I can come up with from scratch when it comes to cartoon ideas. I can't thank enough the people who showed their honest support for my characters and encouraged me to keep going as an independent artist. Here's to hoping for more Grover Guys content hopping on by in the future. Well, that about does it for now on the story of how I made my first animated short film almost entirely by myself. But can you believe I still have tons of trivia left to talk about? I did go into details on deleted scenes and the references I inserted into the short because it will make this video even longer, and I feel like they're better off as their own discussions. If we get 2,500 views on this documentary, I'll do a video on the references and Easter eggs hidden in the Grover Guys. If this reaches 5,000 views, I'll reveal the deleted and alternative scenes. So I hope you enjoyed listening to this story, you learned something new about the Grover Guys, and you gained some inspiration to try and create an animated short film of your own. Don't forget to like this video if you enjoyed it, subscribe for more retrospectives like this, hit the bell so you won't miss them, and leave a duck emoji in the comments to confirm that you watched this video until the very end. Thanks for watching, take care, and thanks for being a fan of the Grover Guys.